Hey, stolen cousins. You already know what time it is. Animated horror stories. Animated horror stories. We're back with our homies SSG Animations. As I always say, feel free to go over there and subscribe to them. Show the appreciation because we be watching with them, chilling with them. You know. Other than that, yeah, Two True Burger King Horror Stories Animated. I think I'd be doing it everywhere else. Have I done Burger King yet? The King's House? What is y'all doing over there? That was cutting up at the Starbucks, so I can only imagine what y'all are doing at Burger King. If you do not mind, please like the video. I will ask you something throughout to comment. And yeah, you should already be subscribed because we are homies. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, let's get right into it. Grab your blunts, grab your blankets, grab a bottle of water, and grab a bag of chips. Okay? Sign a snack on. Let's get up in it. Look at him. Look at him. Trying to stab somebody with a damn crown on.
My name is Anthony Smith, and I was an employee at the Burger King restaurant in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
My reason for writing this is to share with the public the horrific activities that have occurred at Burger King for the past couple of years involving the disappearance of multiple Burger King employees with no information as to where they had gone, and my personal traumatic experience with the infamous Burger King. I interviewed for the job at Burger King on the 21st of November 2017. At the time, I was 21 years old and just looking for a way to get some money while I looked for a better job. The man who interviewed me was named Donald, and since the job didn't require any past experience or anything like that, it was more him giving me the restaurant's rules and guidelines than actually asking me questions.
Okay.
The rule he emphasized the most was kind of odd to me. He made sure I understood the manager and manager's office were strictly off limits, and any issues I had should be taken up with him, the assistant manager, as the manager was a very private man and did not like to be disturbed. Now, it seemed odd to me that the manager wouldn't want to interact with the employees at all, but it didn't seem like a problem at the time, and I was just glad I had gotten the job. The first few weeks working at Burger King were tiring.
I need to see the manager.
I was constantly doing dishes all day, and at night, when I was done with the dishes, I'd have to clean the whole place alone. I wasn't sure if I'd keep the job for much longer, but I did because I needed the money. Eventually, I got used to the routine, and I began bonding with the cooks and a girl named Becky, who always stayed late to lock up. While cooking at night, I couldn't help but always glance at the manager's door and wonder how no one had seen him or if he even cared what went on in the restaurant. One day, while doing the dishes, I decided to ask the cooks if any of them ever met the manager. Hey, this is kind of a weird question, but have any of you ever met the manager? A silence followed before Gerald, the head chef, looked at me and said, "Well, I haven't met him, but I've seen him." The silence remained as Gerald continued with, "It was back when I was still kind of new here. I was working the night shift when I heard his door shut. Obviously, I wanted to know what he looked like, so I stopped and had a look." Gerald paused as if trying to build up the tension. He laughed and continued, "I've told everyone already, he's a pretty normal guy. There's no mystery. There's no secret. Just a man that likes his privacy, so don't go looking for answers where there are no questions, Smith." He patted me on the back and walked away. We were open pretty late that night, but eventually everyone had gone home, and the only one I was left with was Becky. I decided to ask her about the manager as I couldn't believe Gerald's story. "Can I ask you something?" I asked as I cleaned down the last table.
Whatever you want, Smith.
Anthony.
She replied, so I continued with, "What do you think about our manager?" I stopped cleaning and looked at her, trying to see if she had any reaction like the cooks. But she didn't seem even slightly bothered by my question. She just looked up at me and said,
You mean the manager that doesn't exist? Honestly, I've never cared enough to ask questions. I just get paid and go home.
I responded with, "So you didn't find it even slightly strange? What if it's something illegal? She laughed and
She don't
kept
care.
looking at her phone.
Get her money and go on.
Yeah, sure, Smith. Maybe Burger King is a drug lab or
She was cut off by the sound of a shutting door coming from the back. Nobody else was with us, and the only offices at the back
Boy,
were
stop
Donald's
asking
and
so
the
many damn
managers.
questions.
Did you hear that?
You or something.
I said, wondering who was around this late. Becky didn't seem to care as she just replied,
Relax. It's probably just Donald. He stays late sometimes.
I was basically done cleaning, so I decided to check it out. I walked out to the back, and no one was there. So I decided it'd be better to just finish up and leave. I didn't see Donald, I said as I returned to the dining area.
It's cool. I saw who it was.
Becky said, still clearly unbothered.
Did you though?
Really? Who was it? I asked. We were both pretty tired, and I figured I was keeping
What'd she
Becky by
say?
wasting time, so I told her I was done and left her to lock up. That night in bed, I thought for
What'd
a while
she
about
say? Who
what
was
both
it?
Gerald and Becky said, and decided whoever the manager was, I shouldn't care as long as I did my job and got
Get your
paid.
check and go home.
As I walked
Don't
to
say
Burger
nothing
King
else,
the
'cause
next
you don't know
morning,
how to
I
tell
could
the
see a
story.
small crowd forming around the restaurant and a couple of cop cars and police officers trying to disperse the crowd, a lot of which were Burger King employees. I figured someone had broken in and stolen something, but as I got closer, I realized the truth was far more worse than that. My heart fell to my stomach as I saw Becky sighted up against the door with her head tilted
No.
over. There was a large amount of blood on her head, and some had run down her arms and face.
Why did
The
they
police
get
questioned
Becky?
all the
And he
employees
the
of
one
their
asking
whereabouts
all
last
them
night, and
questions.
eventually it came up that I was the last person to see Becky alive. So I was taken into custody to be questioned.
He
I told
killed
the police
nobody.
everything about how Becky and I usually stayed late together every night, and this wasn't a one-time thing. They asked me to think hard, as even the smallest detail could be the answer to this question. And it didn't take that much thinking to remember the only thing I found odd last night. There was a noise, I said. A noise? The officer replied as that detail seemed to have interested him. Yeah, a noise. It came from the back. The officer interrupted with, The back like, out back? No, I replied. Not outside. It's where the offices and stores are. At least, that's what I thought. But when I went to check it out, no one was there. I continued with, Becky said she saw someone, though. The officer's eyes lit up when I said that. Did she say who it was? No.
Facts,
All
too.
she said was he was really tall. That's it. The officer said, visibly disappointed. Nothing else. He continued, Listen, young man, we understand you're probably very emotional right now, and we get it. But a young lady was killed right in front of your workplace. Nothing was stolen, and she wasn't sexually assaulted.
Oh,
Do you understand what that means?
just
It means
murder.
either your friend Becky kept some bad company, or we have a very sick individual running around killing people. So if there's anything you're keeping from us, I suggest you say it.
Ain't nobody
To
keeping
be
nothing
honest,
from you,
I was
but
trying to understand what had happened just as much as the police wanted to, and I don't know why, but I was certain the manager had something to do with Becky's death.
I would blame
I
his
told the
ass
police
too,
I
'cause
didn't
ain't
know
nobody
anything
ever
else,
see him
and
ever.
after some more questions, they let me go. I was told not to travel out of the city, and that I would be contacted again shortly. I didn't think
that
I would
too.
be a suspect,
For real.
but it made sense seeing I was the last person to see her alive. I thought about what to do for a while. I was already the leading suspect in this case and would be prosecuted if the police didn't find the actual killers or any evidence proving otherwise. I thought hard and back to that night, wondering if I had missed anything. All I could remember was the noise of the shutting door. It didn't make any sense how whoever it was left without me seeing them.
That's what I was
I
saying.
laid in bed thinking for hours
How you
before
ain't see no
deciding
damn
I
body
had
if
to
she
find
said
out for
that,
myself what really
like,
happened
you
that
know,
night. I
you
walked
was
over to Burger
up in
King that
there.
night with only one thing on my mind. Who was the tall man Becky saw? It wasn't hard getting past the police tape and getting in through the back door.
Oh, you
The
just
place
breaking
was
the news
quiet.
during-
I couldn't help but notice how being in here alone filled the Burger King with an eerie feeling. I silenced my phone and lowered the brightness before walking straight over to where the offices were. And standing in front of the manager's office, sort of preparing myself for a reveal of some sort, I got the sense of tension as chills ran down my spine. I opened the door, and almost immediately something caught my eye.
What's up in
It
there?
was a door right at the back of his office. A door, I'm guessing, leads outside. It seemed to explain everything, but I couldn't help but still feel confused. I decided to look around the office and see if I'd find answers. It was quite a small office. It had a lot of paperwork and didn't have anything out of place. I figured the door was enough to prove the manager had something to do with Becky's death and would eventually help the cops figure out the rest of the story. But as I was about to leave, I heard something faint, but it got louder and I soon realized they were footsteps.
Oh,
I quickly turned my phone's flashlight off and hid under the desk right when the door slowly creaked open. The person walked into the room and there was silence for a minute. Fear was the only thing I could feel at that moment as I wondered if I would end up like Becky. There was no movement or sound, almost like whoever it was simply stood in the room with me. But then he said,
"You can choose to remain hidden, but the outcome won't be any different, Smith."
His voice cut through the silence, but I remained quiet. He sounded old.
"I'd figured you'd be more enthusiastic than this when you finally got to meet me. Don't you want answers to your questions?"
No.
I decided at this point he obviously knew I was in the room, so there was no point hiding. I hit emergency call on my phone, slipped it in my pocket, and got out from under the table. I was met with an almost 7 feet tall man, completely bald with huge eyes that had completely sagged eye bags under them. He had a slight hunch forward and was skinny. "You knew I'd come?" I was wondering how he found out I was here.
"Yes, you aren't a very smart individual."
He replied with no expression on his face. "Why do you kill her?" I asked, hoping the cops would get here before he killed me too.
"No, I didn't kill her, Smith. You did."
He said, pointing at me.
You
What?
lie. He's gonna
No,
try
I
to
didn't.
frame you.
"Yes, you did.
He screamed, interrupting me.
You killed her, Smith. Your questions killed her. You
What did I
couldn't just
say?
work
All
like
the
everyone
weird
else, could you?
questions, boy.
Well, that's what
but why'd you
killed
kill
her.
Becky, though?
You know, someone like you always comes around
gotta stop
eventually,
calling y'all. It's late
asking
at night.
questions they're not meant to. Far too inquisitive for their own good, and then we have to kill them.
I was both scared and confused at
You
this
gotta
point.
kill Becky
Was he killing
because
people for
was
just
asking all these
trying to find out who he was, and what did he mean by we? What kind of sick man kills people because
Him
they
and
want to know
Donald?
what he looks like? I took a few steps back after asking the question,
Donald
as I
at?
didn't know if I
Killer
would be
too?
getting a reply, he would just get bored and kill me.
Look, Smith, a long time ago, probably before you could even say a word, I was part of a greater mission to keep the world how it is. To be rid of all the purges and mistakes on this earth.
Bro,
I
it's
was a
just
member of
Burger
the
King.
second clan of the KKK. A group with
He's
only
a
one
racist?
goal, to cleanse the world. But instead, we were seen as evil by this weak society and deemed belittling names such as white supremacists and hate
Oh,
groups.
he's a racist.
Unfortunately, I was arrested and put on death row. That was until some members of my clan broke me out, of
supposed to be
course.
dead.
We had to leave our home, but don't be mistaken. We took our mission with us. I am a very wanted man, and where better to hide than the place this society sees as a safe place, he continued. Do you
Burger King
understand,
has a safe
Smith?
place.
People like you are a risk to me and my clan as a whole. We tried to warn you not to ask questions, but you blatantly disregarded our warning.
The sickening look in his eyes couldn't be described, but I knew he was going to kill me. I didn't want to die, so I asked one last question as my final attempt to buy time. "But why Becky?" I asked, crying. He wore a sickened smile on his face as he said,
A part of me would like to say it's because she saw me, but that's not true. Despite her nonchalance toward the situation, she was an abomination. Her color of her skin and her supposed sexual orientation had doomed her already.
Oh,
My
you so
skin
good,
crawled to just
man.
see her walk around every day. It was all just a matter of time.
He paused, then
Well,
continued
get
with,
there and like
Now,
him or
if you're
something.
done buying time, sadly, Smith, I can't have you around anymore.
I ran for the door at the back, but it was locked.
Grab ya.
My heart was pounding, and tears began filling my eyes. I turned and watched as he picked a hammer from the shelf before lunging at me. Fighting back was the only option I had, and I had to take it. I grabbed his hands midair and we began struggling. He was oddly powerful for an elderly man, and as he hit my nose with his head, I let go of him. I was disoriented for a few seconds, and that's when I felt the hammer hit my head. I immediately hit the floor as I was barely conscious and could feel the pool of blood forming around my head as I closed my eyes. In the distance, I could hear sirens, and the last thing I saw was the manager's feet move past me as he unlocked the back door and left. I woke up days later in the hospital and was informed I was almost dead by the time I arrived at the hospital. The manager was identified to be Griffith Theodore, a notorious and wanted leader of the Second Clan white supremacists. It was revealed both Donald and Gerald have supported and aided him for years and were never identified by the authorities. Griffith, Donald, and Gerald had escaped the police and were reported to have already fled the state. The following years after that were difficult. I suffered a traumatic brain injury from the blow to the head and had to undergo therapy and rehabilitation for traumatic brain injury. Burger King ruined my life, and there's a shiver that runs down my spine every time I walk past one. I can't help but always wonder if there's a deeper meaning to the restaurant's infamous slogan. Have it your way.
I mean, you could have just mind your business too. You could just went in there and got your money and went home. Like
getting your first job is supposed to be an exciting thing. It means when you're a teenager, you can spend your money on whatever you want. It's even smart to start putting it aside, according to my parents. I'm Carl, and I happened to have my first job at Burger King when I was 16 years old. This was back in the times before smartphones came out. I worked the late shift on the weekends and focused on school during the week. I was feeling proud of myself as I had learned the register quickly and was efficient about pushing out orders. Looking back, this may have had to do with the fact that we lived in a small town and most of the orders were from regulars who ordered the same thing every time. But still, it was an all-around good experience. Being good at your job makes you want to work harder. One day, my manager, Drew, called me into the back office. "Hey, Carl, you're really killing it out there."
Appreciate you.
"Thanks." "Listen, we're hiring a new girl, and we need a way to bring customers in. I'm really pleased to say that I would really like to put her in your hands while I put on the Burger King costume to attract more customers. But that would require you to work earlier in the day for a bit. Can you handle that?" "Of course I can. I'm looking forward to it." It turns out they hired this girl I had a crush on, named Andrea. Since I got my first paycheck, going to work has hit different. But now that I'd be working with my crush and training her, I couldn't wait to go to work. She came in for orientation and I gave her a tour of the place. I showed her around the back, where we keep everything, the manager's office, and the drive-through window. I showed her how to work the headset and smiled at her. "So, how are you feeling about everything?"
It's a lot. But once it processes, I'll remember everything.
"It's a pretty easy job. Plus, in our small little town, we get the same customers regularly, and they order the same things."
That makes it a lot easier.
"Yeah, but sadly, we do have some crappy days around here. Just the other day, this lady from out of town came in, and she was trying to order things off the menu that weren't there. Then she yelled at me because what she wanted wasn't on the menu. Like, sorry, lady." Andrea cracked a smile and laughed, and God help me if that didn't make my day.
Some people can be so stupid sometimes.
You'll learn that here. You don't think people can be that stupid, but they are.
I look forward to working with you, Carl.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. And it was fun. For weeks, we worked together, and though she was a little slower than me, she did a good job. Drew would spend the day outside wearing the Burger King costume, waving at every single person that drove or walked by. One night he walked around the back to come in through the employees-only entrance. It was getting late and time to close, but we're supposed to wait until Drew gets inside and tells us to lock the doors and start closing up the restaurant. I watched as Drew, still in costume, walked up to the front and walked through the doors. "Was the door locked?" Drew looked at me and lifted a one-shoulder shrug. "Drew?" He just stared at me.
What's wrong with him?
That Burger King mask covering his face made this interaction creepy. But because Andrea was behind the
it's a
counter
whole
with me, I
mess.
tried my
It's
best
not
to play
him
it
up in
cool.
there.
Okay, man. We're just going to start closing up the place. Mind locking the door while you're there? Drew started walking slowly toward the counter, the Burger King face grinning ear to ear at me, making each step more eerie than the next.
Back
A
up.
horrible feeling washed over me, and it hit me harder and harder the closer Drew got.
Then it's not him.
He reached the counter and leaned in close.
Carl! What's going on?
I don't know, Andrea. A hissing sound came out of the Burger King mascot, and he held a finger to his lips in a hushing motion. He reached across the counter and tried to grab me.
Oh.
I managed to dodge his grip and took Andrea's hand, and we ran for the back office, locking the door behind us. We have to call the police, I told her.
I'll call them.
I'll keep him out. Right as she picked up the phone, all the lights went out, and the phone line went dead. I could hear her trembling voice from the other side of the room.
How her phone line going dead?
Carl, I'm scared.
Don't worry, Andrea. We're safe as long as this door is locked. She screamed bloody murder as Drew began banging heavily on the door.
Is it Drew?
Let me in.
Drew.
Andrea came running into my arms, and I hollered toward the door. Turn the lights back on. Come on, Carl. Don't you want to play cat and mouse? Or in this case, employee versus the king. We heard maniacal laughter on the other side of the door, and the banging persisted. Andrea screamed in terror and clung to me. All this noise in the situation at hand was causing me my own level of stress, and I felt as though I was going to freak out too. But I couldn't. Andrea was counting on me, and like hell I was going to let her down. I had to get my shit together and get us both out safely. The banging stopped and everything went quiet. Andrea went to say something, but I shushed her. The silence was almost more unsettling than all the chaos. But silence meant a possibility. Was Drew still out there?
Yes.
Was it worth opening the door and taking a chance?
No. No, it's not.
I had no choice but to find out.
Boy.
Andrea, I'm going to open the door.
Are you crazy? He could still be there.
He's right there.
Maybe he passed out or he went away.
He didn't.
Either way, we've got to do something or be stuck in here until the restaurant manager comes in.
When is that?
I don't like this, Carl. What if you get hurt or killed?
He might.
If he comes at me, I want you to run out of here and go to the police.
Carl, I couldn't leave you behind.
Oh,
you have to, Andrea. If any of us gets out, it's you. I can take care of myself, and I will.
Because you told us that you were scared.
I know you don't like this, but if we sit in here, that means he knows where we're at. Who knows what lengths he'll go to get in here? We have to take our chances.
Okay, please be careful.
I nodded, and as I felt around the room, looking for the door in the pitch dark, I began to sweat. Panic began to set in, and I wanted nothing more than to crawl into a hole. But then, the sound of Andrea's shaking breath kicked me into gear. Protecting her was the priority.
I guess.
I opened the door, and the moonlight illuminated the inside of the building.
Next, yeah.
I didn't see anyone anywhere. I whispered for Andrea to take my hand, and we were going to run. She took my hand, and we beelined it for the doors. We heard a psychotic scream from the back, and out came Drew, still dressed as the king, running out with a butcher knife in his hand. He chased us until we got to the police station down the street. It turned out Drew was an addict, and he was using the costume as a cover to inject meth into himself. He was fired and sent to rehab. The incident was scarring, but it also made Andrea and I close. Luckily, there were no more incidents like that, and our new manager, Carla, did monthly drug tests for everyone's safety to ensure that things like that never happened again.
Carla said, hell no, we ain't about to play that damn game. Y'all, He over there chasing people with knives and stuff, because he want to be a damn druggie. What they got to do with anybody else? Ooh, what was your first job? That's my question for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoyed watching it with me. Until next time, you guys. Bye-bye.